What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Same Circle Wrestling back again. We just watched TNA Wrestling May Mayhem, which is the last Friday night broadcast that TNA is going to be having. They are going to be moving to Wednesday nights. I think we already mentioned it, but if you follow us on Facebook, you know that Ring of Honor is also going to be coming to that 1-2 punch on Wednesday. So that's going to be nice to have, I guess, but at the same time, I'm still going to be watching Lucha Underground and NXT. So for now, we're just going to talk about what happened tonight on Impact. We'll go through Lucha Underground. We'll talk about NXT. We'll talk about Ring of Honor coming. We'll also talk about Elimination Chamber, which comes up this Sunday.
Fight Owens, fight. Fight Owens, fight.
Yeah, and Kevin Owens' new deal as well, so... as far as TNA, they really only had a couple matches that really mattered.
Like the I Quit match was pretty much the staple of the event.
Yeah, which like really wasn't even that great. It started off with a knockouts match, 6 sides of steel, basically just a cage match between Taryn Terrell and Gail Kim. Taryn Terrell wins. Basically nothing really develops there. Then there was an X Division gauntlet for the X Division title, which went to Rockstar Spud, previously held by Kenny King. Then we saw the Wolves beat the Dirty Heels in, I believe it was the second of a best-of-5 series, which is probably just going to drag out to the Slammiversary, the next Slammiversary, whatever it is. It's not a pay-per-view, is it? Slammiversary a pay-per-view?
I don't think it is. I'm not sure. I don't think they've been having their pay-per-views actually on pay-per-view lately, but I mean, that is one of their major shows, so you never really can be sure.
It's basically the WrestleMania of TNA. And then EC3 beat Mr. Anderson, and Kurt Angle beat Eric Young in an I Quit match. So, I mean, really wasn't very eventful, but, you know, I would have expected to see a little bit more considering it's their last show on a Friday, but...
What do you make of them using an I Quit match 2 weeks after the WWE did the same thing between John Cena and Rusev? Do you see that kind of parody coming back and forth between the two brands?
Well, they seem to do that with more than just the I Quit matches. I mean, they really seem to kind of try and mirror what WWE's doing. And I don't know, I think ultimately the whole move to Wednesday is just a poor decision on their part, but I don't know, maybe it'll play out well for them. I don't know.
Well, that move to Wednesday makes more sense with the announcement that we're going to cover in a little bit, like in a minute or so. But
yeah.
I mean, it makes more sense, but still, they're going up against such a stacked lineup on a Wednesday night that, I mean, if you're a wrestling fan, you have your complete choice of options at the buffet of wrestling. But I think if you find one or two promotions you definitely think are outpacing the other two, I mean, it's going to win every single week.
You're competing with 3 other hours of programming that already has a good reputation, and Lucha Underground's building so fast that it's hard to compete with those two things, especially with a brand like TNA that's dying. I mean, even bringing in Ring of Honor, which is a quality promotion, I don't know where they're going to be able to go with it.
Well, like I said, Ring of Honor, watch who's going to headline WrestleMania 38, because, I mean, it's hard to find a top guy in the WWE coming in who hasn't made his mark in Ring of Honor. Look at Kevin Owens, look at Sami Zayn, look at Seth Rollins, look at Kevin Owens, but Daniel Bryan. All those guys made a huge name in Ring of Honor before they even graced WWE. So, I mean, it's a great launching ground, kind of like NXT. You see where the future is coming from, but if you already have Lucha Underground to watch, why would you watch Ring of Honor?
Yeah, that really is the thing. I mean, WrestleMania 38 more so than anywhere else, because, I mean, you got the top of the Ring of Honor card. I mean, you got your Jay Lethal, you got your Briscoes. I mean, it's people you really can't see going to the WWE as of right now for one reason or another. There was the reports that WWE was interested in the Briscoes, but the Briscoes declined in order to be able to pursue their business opportunities outside of wrestling. Jay Lethal, he's been around forever. He's never made the jump over. He could possibly go over in a type of Samoa Joe situation, but I don't think he's quite the same level of name to make that as much of a possibility. So I think for Ring of Honor, you're looking more at the people who are the future of that company to eventually become the future of WWE. So I would say it would be something more like a WrestleMania 38 that far down the road to find the next crop of stars.
So basically, there's not much that I want to throw in about Ring of Honor. I'm definitely looking forward to it. For me, I'm still going to be watching Lucha Underground and then NXT, same way I've been doing it. But, you know, with the cable company that I have, I'm able to just watch everything on Destination America the day after anyway, so it's not going to hurt me at all.
Yeah, all you got to do is go into Lifestyles on Demand, and there it is, so...
Yeah, I mean, it's like... And it's convenient to have that, especially when you have 4 shows on a Wednesday night, and that's really the most questionable thing that's in my mind.
And that is the real shame of it, because, I mean, Ring of Honor, basically the more, at least in my eyes, the brand I'd rather watch, happens to be going up against the Lucha Underground time slot. And I'd definitely watch Ring of Honor over NXT at this point, but Lucha Underground, it's not such an easy decision. I don't think there's any wrestling I'd rather watch over Lucha Underground right now.
Yeah.
Just the way their storylines are built and the way that their matches play together, they're able to take their somewhat minimal roster and put everybody on every show and make it mean something every single week. It's something you don't see out of a Ring of Honor. You kind of see it out of TNA only because they put Kurt Angle on every other week to defend his title in a match you know he's going to win.
Well, the production itself really is what really gets me, because it's almost like a TV show more so than a wrestling promotion. And I think ultimately, like, that's what really gets me sucked in as a fan. And also, like, their storylines are way, you know, they're more brutal and more interesting than what you see in WWE nowadays.
I mean, look, they had a death match featuring a guy who was just in a casket match, but unlike WWE where you have a casket match on a Monday and you're going to see Kane again on Thursday, it's like, all right, you saw Mil Muertes go in the casket match, 2 months ago? And you haven't seen him since, and he comes back this past Wednesday on Lucha Underground. There was like a real stipulation to you go into that casket and you actually die, you're dead to the company, you're dead to the fans. That's some kind of kayfabe loyalty that I haven't seen out of many of these promotions, and it just gives Lucha that extra edge that the matches mean something.
Yeah, and like you said, it's like the fact that when a character dies off, they're gone, and we just saw that this week with the Phoenix match. I mean, let's run through the card actually right now. Aerostar and Johnny Mundo kicked it off, and
I gotta tell you, I love heel Johnny Mundo.
Yeah, me too. I think it's impressive that they had 3 matches that were all main event caliber on this week's match, or on this week's show.
Yeah, I think the part that really stuck out was that they put the Lucha Underground Championship at around like the 8:25 minute mark of the show. Just showing you that, like, okay, we have a title match, but that's not what's most important to the show this week.
Yeah, and that's what's so impressive is that you're putting generally your title match, especially the Lucha Underground title, which is the primary belt, you know, that's a co-main event essentially on this episode. So that's really impressive that they're putting their storylines ahead of their championship matches.
Yeah, that's just a testament to the in-ring quality that, I mean, you can have faith that the match is going to be so good that not putting your title match on last isn't even going to devalue your title at all.
Yeah, so the title match was Prince Puma and Hernandez, and a good match overall. Of course it was. And like I said earlier in the week, it's just incredible that Lucha Underground is able to top itself like week after week. Like, it seems like the only competition that Lucha Underground has is last week's show, and they seem to top it every single time, and it's incredible.
Not to mention, when you look at the fact that, as we just said, the title match was in the middle of the show, and then you watch that Prince Puma shows his resiliency and defeats Hernandez, with Conan's help. But all of a sudden, that match is over, and you got 20 minutes left of the show, and you're told that there's going to be Mil Muertes making his return against Phoenix. And in your mind, you're going, well, how the hell are you going to top the match you just saw? And yet, those two guys came out and delivered.
Yeah. That match was pretty intense. At one point, Mil Muertes brings Phoenix up to the top of the temple. And I always thought that, number one, I think that having cement stairs like less than 6 feet away from the ring is a little sketchy to begin with. But he takes him to the top of the stairs, and there's a second balcony, essentially. It's on top of another building over by the announce table where Matt Striker and Vampiro, who are actually very good commentators, usually sit, and basically just power bombs him through the thing. And we were all like, holy shit, basically, at that point.
Well, it's like, oh god, they killed Phoenix, and there's still 10 minutes left of the show. What's going to happen from here on out?
Yeah. Well, basically nothing happened. They just had those, the dudes with the skulls on their faces.
Yeah, I guess like the death equivalent of the Angels came out and rescued Phoenix. Well, not rescued, pulled him out of the wreckage, threw him in the ring for the count out.
Yeah. So I thought it was cool the way that they did it. And we also saw at the end, the crew and Dario Cueto in that little scene, which I thought was pretty awesome. Where they kind of fed him to Cueto's brother in the cage, or the whatever it is.
Dario's crazy brother in a cage.
So they still haven't really made clear exactly what that is, but it's definitely getting closer to it.
Yeah, and I think they've built that up to the point where realistically anything is going to be let down from that. I mean, if you take a look, you see who's in the cage, and it's anything short of Goro from Mortal Kombat, that's going to be a complete letdown.
It's too bad that the person inside the cage can't be Brian Cage coming out to beat the shit out of people.
True. It's gonna end up being Brock Lesnar.
Shush, we have a lot to talk about Brock Lesnar tonight. Because I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, there's a lot of news on the Brock Lesnar front.
I haven't heard very much about it.
When we get to that point, whenever you want me to cue into it, I got quite a bit on Brock Lesnar from backstage reports.
So, well, do you want to do it right now, and then we can go to NXT?
Sure, not a problem. Some WWE news has broken. Brock Lesnar is going to work his first house show since 2004.
Jesus Christ.
And it's going to be one of the Japan shows where also featured on the same card. So imagine this lineup based on what you've seen on WWE programming, taking a house show to Japan. On the same exact card, you're going to see Chris Jericho make his return for what he's considering his summer run, but his first ever match against Finn Balor.
Oh, wow.
And he said on his podcast, I listened to a little bit of it at the gym today, but he took so long to get into the interview with Finn Balor that I didn't get all of it. But he doesn't want it televised because he's so in awe of what Finn Balor brings to the company that he wants to experience the in-ring portion and reward the Japanese fans on something that nobody else is going to get. So on the card, you already get Chris Jericho against Finn Balor. And on top of that, you're going to get Brock Lesnar facing Kofi Kingston is what it's primarily already being billed as. So it looks like some kind of squash match, but still, Brock Lesnar working a house show. I mean, they're trying to get their money's worth out of this guy this time around on his contract.
And this is why I love Chris Jericho, because he comes back when he wants to work with a guy that he knows has talent. And that's why he came back to work with Bray Wyatt. He came back because he wanted to have a match with Bray Wyatt. He wanted to have a little feud with Bray Wyatt because he knows that, you know, the guy's deserving of a decent push. And I think that's the same reason he's coming back to work with Finn Balor. He knows that the guy deserves it, and he wants to work with him.
Well, that's the thing with Jericho. He doesn't want to go back on TV unless there's a reason, and he doesn't want to work a house show unless he has a reason. And he's only going back to work with these guys because he sees them as the next, you know, the next coming of the Y2J or the next coming of the next big star, and he wants to help give them whatever rub they need in a house show mentality to kind of boost their stock moving forwards.
Exactly. It's like if he wants to put somebody over, he's very selective about who he does put over, so he's not just some, old jobber, like kind of like Rob Van Dam was when he had his short run not too long ago.
Yeah, going back to the Brock Lesnar note, it's interesting that they're choosing to bring him back on the Japan house shows just by the way that his heavyweight title run in New Japan Pro Wrestling ended in a contract dispute that eventually had him dropping the title to Kurt Angle, who dropped it to the eventual next champion over there. There was some acrimony in the way that ended, so it'll be interesting to see how the Japanese crowds react to him.
Well, that's the one thing about Brock Lesnar that is kind of lost kayfabe-wise. When you watch him kayfabe, you see Brock Lesnar as a guy who's only going after that title, and all he wants to do is hurt people who get in his way. But if you ever see like a regular interview with him, he's just as much an in-ring performer as a Chris Jericho or a Dwayne The Rock Johnson. He has the same idea. He wants to go there to give the right rub to the right people, and he wants to return to Japan for the same idea, but he's returning to house shows in that span so he can return as what we all thought he was going to appear at SummerSlam and get some kind of rematch with Seth Rollins. He's actually already advertised for the Raws ahead of Battleground, which comes up after Money in the Bank. So there's even a chance we could see him, at the Battleground pay-per-view beating the shit out of somebody else to prove that he deserves his rematch at SummerSlam.
I think Lesnar, before his UFC run, really seemed like he was constantly in character, and you didn't get the other side of Brock Lesnar. And now, once you see like his post-fight interviews in UFC and things like that, you were able to see that he's not that kind of guy. He's not a beast. He's actually more of he's an easygoing guy. Realistically, he lives on a farm and things like that. So,
have you seen that interview where like they did an ESPN like 30-minute thing about his farm in Minnesota?
Yeah, I remember seeing that. It showed his gym and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, and he talks about how he doesn't have a computer. All he has is a landline phone. He doesn't have a cell phone, so if Paul Heyman wants to contact him, he has to call a house phone. And the whole idea is, like, he doesn't want to get caught up in the spotlight of everything, but he has no problem going out there and acting, which I think is something on Brock Lesnar we don't give him enough credit for. We go out there and see the legitimate beast that he is, but he's a showman at heart, and he really puts that on the line.
And he likes to do it. Like he said on ESPN on SportsCenter, he said that he loves to do it, and I believe him. I think that also it's interesting that he has a TV, so he does watch it from time to time, but he tries to stay away from the internet and things like that.
Yeah, which I think is just really cool, because I feel like a guy like that would just be sitting on forums trolling people, just trying to prove that he's the big badass that he is. And to find out that he just doesn't care between times he's getting paid to care is just awesome.
It's good, too, because, if I was a superstar, I don't want to see all that feedback. And because, there's always these people on the internet that are pissed off at you for literally no reason and giving you negative feedback. But, sometimes it's constructive, but most of the time it's on the internet it's not.
Seth, we were talking about that earlier with Roman Reigns, and I'm sure we'll get to that right before our Elimination Chambers preview. But, like, people on Reddit are just unrelentless on certain characters.
All right, so let's roll through NXT.
A relatively quick show.
Yeah, it was relatively quick, and it opened with Kevin Owens coming out to Sami Zayn's music. Basically, he just talked about Sami Zayn and Samoa Joe, just kind of the things that happened to TakeOver. William Regal ends up announcing him and Crow having a match later as the main event. Because Solomon Crow, it was nice to see Solomon Crow kind of in the picture with Kevin Owens, even though he does end up losing the match eventually. But yeah, it was nice because I think Solomon Crow's kind of dropped off a little bit, it seems like. So if they can thrust him back into a higher level. But like I was thinking earlier, is NXT is a developmental place, and you're not there just to get a push. You're there to develop your character and get better and get better and get better until you're eventually ready for the main roster. So even if you're not at the top of the NXT ladder, you know, you're still there for a reason.
Well, the issue with Solomon Crow is that he came out with a gimmick that was interesting, and it left us with a lot of questions, like, okay, what are we going to see moving forwards? But he never fully developed it in, like, the coming weeks after his debut, that now he's basically having to start from scratch again to kind of prove what his character is and what the gimmick is. Like, he came out to, like, that static kind of dial-up tone, like he's here to disrupt stuff. But he never fully got to use that to his advantage. So now he's just got to, like, rediscover that and try to figure out what he truly stands for.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is that's why you're in NXT, to figure your own character out. And for them to figure your character out, rather.
And one thing I want to make note of before we move on is Kevin Owens' heel work in this promo to open the show was completely impeccable. I mean, he had the crowd cheering for him, and before that could even really take hold, he shut it down. He basically mocked the crowd for cheering him. And it's really something that you don't see a lot today in WWE. I mean, they're perfectly content to have their heels getting cheered. They like to spin it as being a controversial superstar. So to see somebody take the old school approach to it and just go for that pure heel heat was really refreshing.
And the dude's good. I mean, like, just considering the fact that he hasn't been with NXT for very long, he's already got main roster contract. I mean, you can't really deny how fast he's moving up, and it's for good reason.
Kevin Owens has the Rock kind of heat. He had pure hatred when he came into the company, just based on his interactions with Sami Zayn and trying to take the top spot. But he runs the heel factor just like The Rock, because he comes out and pretty much says, oh yeah, you guys hate me, and now all of a sudden you're cheering for me, so what the hell happened that all of a sudden I was such a bad guy, and now all of a sudden I'm a hero? Get over yourself. I'm not here for you guys. I'm here to get what's mine. And that's what The Rock did. And look how high The Rock soared after his initial kind of flop when he came to WWE.
Yeah, and it's impressive, too, because not to take anything away from The Rock, but back then, it was easier to convince fans that you were genuinely a bad guy, because nowadays you have so much of this internet interaction where you know somebody's a heel, and you know what they're trying to do. So it's harder to get behind them as a heel. Back then, it was like you were convinced that the guy was genuinely a douchebag. So it's impressive that Kevin Owens is building that amount of heat in the amount of time that he has been allotted, realistically.
Yeah, he's literally been given like 3 inches, and he's taken an entire mile with it so far, and I'm excited to see what he can bring to the WWE roster, but just like I was a little bit weary about Neville when he first came over, I'm almost worried about trying to give him too much too quick and then not having a place to put him.
Yeah. And Neville's still in a spot right now that he's just kind of floating around on the main roster, but I'm sure we can probably touch on that at some point as well.
Yeah, and so we briefly mentioned Kevin Owens has a new contract, which rumored that he has a new contract. I've seen it confirmed on a couple different posts, but I haven't seen anything that's like been definitive from WWE. But as per this podcast, I'm just going to go out and say he is now on the main roster officially.
Yeah, most likely. I don't see... I mean, especially if you're going to put him in a match with John Cena, I mean, that tells me that you got a lot of faith in the guy.
So that tells you he's going to drop the title to Finn Balor at the next TakeOver special, and then Kevin Owens will go on to live his life in the main roster until Sami Zayn comes back. And then I see that being Kevin Owens' feud, you know, through Hell in a Cell, Survivor Series, and Tables, Ladders, and Chairs.
Well, Bill and I were talking about it earlier, and it's like you build up Kevin Owens so hard that it's hard for him to drop the belt to somebody clean on NXT. So, you know, with the way William Regal's been building up the storyline, it almost seems like Regal's going to strip him of the belt before he moves to the main roster.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Or somebody like Samoa Joe just coming out and leveling him when the referee's not looking, and Finn Balor takes the title off him. And then Kevin Owens just takes off with his tail between his legs trying to fight for the better prize.
Yeah.
Those two do seem like the most logical approaches. I mean, NXT, you can at least have faith. It won't necessarily be predictable, but it will at least make sense. So I would expect to see something along those lines. in terms of getting Kevin Owens off of NXT.
I mean, Finn Balor doesn't need much more development. He's already where he needs to be. His character's there. So he's ready to be at the top of NXT.
Yeah, and definitely when he has a cast of crew like Samoa Joe and Tyler Breeze that are healthy and ready to challenge him for that title, I think it's a perfect spot for the men's division. And then, you know, what they're talking about with the next NXT TakeOver is actually having the women's Fatal 4-Way being the main event. So, I mean, there's an easy way to write Kevin Owens off of that title without making it a super big deal.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much the verdict on Kevin Owens right now. I think we're all pushing for him because I really like Kevin Owens and what he's been doing.
I think he has the entire X Factor to be that heel bad guy on the main roster. It's just finding him a spot where he fits and then finding a spot that he can work well, because he's obviously not going to come in and work for the title when you have a heel already with the title in hand. But it's going to be interesting to see how he works his way and earns his bumps and takes his credit on the main roster.
Well, there's always room in the U.S. title and the Intercontinental title pictures for a heel, so especially a guy of his caliber. So
yeah, I read something interesting online. Is how the way they have Kevin Owens feuding with so many different people at once. I mean, you have him feuding with Sami Zayn, you got your John Cena, you have your Samoa Joe, you have your Finn Balor, and maybe even a Solomon Crow at this point. And it really harkens back in the days to where Dusty Rhodes, who is now, if not the head booker, then one of the main bookers of NXT, used to book himself as the sort of family man heel who would still do psychopathic things to get his way, and he would book himself into feuds with half the roster at once. So it's almost coming off right now as if Dusty is using Kevin Rhodes almost as a self-insert character in his booking of NXT.
yeah, and it's really hard to see, like, considering the way they've built Kevin Owens up, it's hard to see him losing any of these feuds at all, even the John Cena feud.
Yeah, and as Bill said, he's the blue-collar bad guy. He's there to do it for his family, so what easier way to get the fans to kind of rally around a heel other than say, you know, oh yeah, in this economy, in this kind of workspace, you know what, I'm not here to be a good guy, I'm not here to be a bad guy, I'm here to make money and, you know, be able to raise my family. So there's no easier way to do that. There's not many guys on the main roster who are standing there and saying, oh yeah, I'm doing this for my family. Like, you show me another guy out there, outside of maybe like Randy Orton, who has a family, who can say, or the Big Show even, we've seen that as a tireless Big Show routine about doing it for his family. But outside of that, you don't see anybody you viably watch and give a shit about when he talks about he's doing it for his family. So that's a perfect role for Kevin Owens to take.
So yeah, I think we got our Kevin Owens fill. We'll move on to the first NXT match, which was Bayley versus Emma. Basically, just Emma wins, and it basically just kind of shows that Dana Brooke and Emma have a relatively strong alliance, and Charlotte comes out to try and help Bayley, and Emma and Dana Brooke come out on top anyway, so it's going to be nice to see where those two go heading forward. We haven't seen a lot of Dana Brooke, but I'd like to be able to see where Emma does go, because I liked Emma even on the main roster. So it's interesting, number one, that she's back in NXT, and to see her also trying to elevate Dana Brooke is interesting as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because we see this NXT women's division as kind of being the highlight of the main roster, especially the injuries to Sami Zayn and Hideo Itami. We kind of see the show taking hits left and right of people that, you know, kind of carried the show for its hour or a week. So being able to show, you know, you have your top four women, the Bayley, Charlotte, Sasha Banks, and Becky Lynch, and then you're able to see people like Emma and Dana Brooke kind of step into a mid-level in the women's division. It just shows that there's a depth there that they can work with, and they can have people move back and forth between the middle and the top of the card, kind of with a relatively easy fluidity that kind of builds that as a great stable moving forward, especially when all those women go to the main roster, which I don't see a reason why any of them can't. It just shows a great promise for women's wrestling moving forwards, especially stepping away from the Divas moniker that they have now.
Well, I think they don't. I don't think they. The thing about the main roster, as far as Divas goes, is that they don't give them a lot of time as it is. So to bring up women from the NXT division, it's hard to throw them in somewhere. So really, they're in a much better position in NXT than they would be on the main roster. I mean, at the last TakeOver, we saw 2 women's matches. So what does that tell you about the difference between the NXT women's division and the main roster?
It all starts with giving that Divas title in the WWE to Paige. Paige is a member of NXT. She has all of the same intangibles that they had there, but she's kind of melded into the Divas role that they have in WWE. You give that to Paige and have somebody like Charlotte or Becky or Sasha Banks come up and challenge it, then immediately you can almost have an entire flip of the system and have a women's division that's worth watching. Because you tell me Paige and Sasha Banks get a 10-minute match on Raw, you're not going to watch the whole damn thing.
And that's exactly it, is the fact that on the main roster you have room for three women, and on NXT you have 6, maybe 7 at a time involved in reasonable storylines.
Yeah, that depth of the women's division in NXT is the most remarkable thing, I think. I mean, you have your top talent down there, but just as far as it goes, you have your 4 divas that are in your main title picture, and then you've got that Alexa Bliss, you've got your Emma, your Dana Brooke. And Dana Brooke in particular, in her first match, she looked pretty shaky in the ring, but in the 2 or 3 matches she's had since, I noticed afterwards that there was nothing glaringly apparent about her not quite performing as smoothly in the ring as you'd expect of someone on TV. So I think even going down as far as you can down that card, there's just solid talent all the way through, and there is no excuse that the WWE has for not eventually making that Divas division as good as NXT is now in the future, if not better.
Especially with 3 hours to fill on Raw.
Yeah, that's not going to fully take effect until the end of the calendar year, but it gives a lot of stuff for the fans now to look forward to. Because with Triple H at the helm, there's very few things he can do wrong to take it from one group and bring it up to the other. It's all on him and convincing Vince McMahon that you need to give women a chance, not divas a chance. Give these women a great shot at putting on great matches, because that's what they're doing in NXT. You can't tell me Vince wouldn't want any of those matches on his Raw or his SmackDown shows on a week. I'd watch every single time.
Well, I mean, and also NXT is so good now that you don't want to take away from it. So, it does help. It is going to help the main roster when they eventually go up, but you don't want to take away from a show that's thriving with them in that position as of right now. So, we'll move on to the tag match, Blake and Murphy. And they ended up getting a win, and Alexa Bliss was with them. Basically, all this did was show that she's part of the tag team essentially now. Not a whole lot else to say about that match as far as I'm concerned.
Now, I would like to point out, Alexa Bliss seems to be a lot more natural as a heel character than she was as a face. I mean, she was pretty likable as a face, but she just has some mannerisms and the subtleties of a heel down pretty well already, and I was surprised to see that. And
Yeah.
it's a really nice thing to see.
Yeah, she's always had kind of that evil ear mentality to her, to where like she's always kind of listening and paying attention to what's going on. But when you saw her as a fairy, it was easy to write her off as just another cutesy divas gimmick, but she's kind of come into her own as a heel.
Yeah, and now she has an edge and something to actually, where you can point at and, actually single her out as, having a character versus, what she was as a babyface.
Yeah, and I think from that we can pretty much work into Raw and SmackDown just to kind of wrap those up quick, because there wasn't too much that happened there.
Yeah, I mean, the rest of NXT was just Balor had his victory over Dillinger, and then Owens beat Solomon Crowe, so really not much else went down on NXT anyway.
Yeah, especially if we want to wrap up Elimination Chamber before that happens.
Yeah. So do we want to talk Raw or SmackDown or anything like that?
I think out of the two shows, we basically saw Dean Ambrose winning his official title shot by getting that contract signed, even if he stole a police truck to do the job.
I thought it was cool because you get to see shades of the Austin kind of attitude era type thing.
Stealing the Zamboni and skating or driving it down while drinking beer.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the kind of stuff that they really have to do with Dean Ambrose and like his gimmick in general. Like he's got the Austin style thing, but like he just needs to be written into scenarios like this where he can really show off like the crazy level of Dean Ambrose that is there and has been there but hasn't been utilized.
Yeah, and if you watch like the side shoot interviews with Dean Ambrose, pretty much what he said was he's made a lot of enemies in the police departments, but yeah, he's sure also made his share bit of friends. So all of a sudden, his friends happened to let him out for signing a couple autographs, and they gave him a police escort and even let him drive the bus. So it's not like he stole it and just broke out of prison. He kind of used his, I don't know, babyface mentality to kind of get an upper edge and be able to, you know, come back and sign his contract.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome.
And then on top of that, we saw, if anything, we saw a repeat of all the matches that are going to culminate in the international or intercontinental title match. And then we found out about Rusev, who is now out for the foreseeable future with a lower right leg injury. And he's rumored to be replaced in the Elimination Chamber with Bray Wyatt, but nothing's official come out of that yet. But yeah, that's a stinging blow to the Intercontinental title picture, especially with the Rusev-Lana split that we saw recently. All of a sudden having Rusev have to force his way out of television, that definitely hurts like the mid-card level feuds.
Yeah, I mean, especially like where do you put Dolph Ziggler when he was kind of on the verge of a Rusev sort of situation? I didn't personally see Rusev winning the Intercontinental Championship at the Chamber, but it would have been nice to have him in the picture.
Yeah, and especially one of the things I was reading, it was like you can already write off R-Truth, and you can automatically write off whoever is going to replace Rusev because there's obviously no storyline for either of those guys to hold the title.
There's no word on who replaces Rusev yet?
The rumor is Bray Wyatt, just based on the fact that he has nothing else going on for that pay-per-view, and he's literally the only upper mid-carder left.
See, I would have thought he would have something going on just like thrown in there, because I don't know what the full card is. I don't think they've announced the full card anyway.
I have 7 matches for the full card right now, which sounds about right for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the rumor is for the pre-show or whatever they're doing to kick it off, it's going to be the Meta Gods or whatever the hell they're calling Damian Sandow and Curtis Axel against Harper and Rowan as like their kickoff match.
Yeah.
So other than that, I mean, who on the upper part of the roster doesn't have a match except for Bray Wyatt? So throw him in there. I mean, he's a top-level star you can put in the Intercontinental title, which sounds like Vince McMahon. Just man down, okay, who's the next big guy we can pull up? And they pull Bray Wyatt, stick him in there, have him take a couple shots, and get counted out easily.
And it's sad because I think Bray Wyatt needs to be involved in storylines all the time. There's no reason that he should be on the sideline in a sense, especially right now when his character's at a point where I think people can get behind him.
Well, that's exactly why when you move into the Elimination Chamber full-on preview, which I don't know if you want to do that now.
Yeah, might as well.
All right, yeah, let's kick off with that match then, because I have a couple things I want to stab out there based on this match. Yeah, we'll kick it off with that tag match I just mentioned, if it does happen, which I assume it will. But Sandow and Axel against Harper and Rowan, who do you have going over?
I don't know. I have to go with Harper and Rowan simply because Sandow and Axel, I don't think they're really going anywhere right now. And, you know, if they do, I'd be fine with that too. I'd be fine with either of these teams winning, to be honest with you. But I don't think either team's really going to get a decent push as it stands right now either way. So I think it's really just there for the fuck of it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I don't really see a ton of momentum for either team. If there is, it's on the side of Harper and Rowan, just because of the circumstances and the status of Bray Wyatt and how they might eventually be involved in a storyline of his down the road. And I really, like you said, the Mega Powers really have nothing going for them.
They're comedy acts for now.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, they had so much momentum for Damian Sandow. They could have struck while that iron was hot, and they're just exactly where he was 6 months ago, beneath where he was when the Miz angle started.
Yeah, they just kind of missed the boat on that whole thing.
Well, the whole idea is that they can still strike. That iron is still warm based on the fact that everybody was such a big fan of Sandow's shoe promo he did in the ring where he said he just wants to be himself. And then the next week he's forced into being Macho Man. So I think based after their win on the last pay-per-view, as what Seth said, Harper and Rowan get this one just because they need to establish themselves as a tag team again. And not being in the chamber hurts them, but here they can get a free win that kind of picks up their pace and we can see them take it on Raw and run with it for the summer.
I think putting Sandow with Axel was kind of a mistake because there's nowhere for them to put that tag team. You know, there's no other comedy-style tag teams, you know, that they can really feud with. Because we used to see El Torito and things like that in Hornswoggle, where it was sort of its own division, like a comedy division in a sense. But there's not really anything there for them to do with those two guys. So I guess, you know, they pretty much just threw them together on a whim, and, you know, they're just floating around as of right now.
And it's interesting to note, I mean, one of the common complaints in recent years has been the shallowness of WWE's tag division. And now you've got at least 8 teams floating around, and there's still little to no story development going on with any of them.
Yeah, and even the storylines that are there, like, really aren't that involved, and now you're just going to throw 6 tag teams into an elimination chamber and say that's a thing. So it's I don't know how that's going to play out either, to be honest with you.
But the best part is that you can have Harper and Rowan steamroll Sandow and Axel and then immediately challenge whoever comes out of the elimination chamber as the top and say, you know what, we weren't in that chamber. We want our fair shot at these guys because, you know, we just got our win on a pay-per-view. Here we are to screw shit up. We're here to be the next top guys, and they can immediately insert themselves into the top title picture.
Well, if WWE was any sort of smart about it, they would do that. And right now, I'm wondering why they're airing a CM Punk special on WWE Network.
Is it that one where he's on his bus talking about rising to CM Punk?
Probably.
Yeah, I think they just own the rights to that, so they're just airing it for the hell of it on a Friday night.
That's kind of... I wouldn't even air that live, you know what I mean? That's kind of fucked up to me.
Anyways, moving on from that, we have what's probably going to open the show. We got Neville against Bo Dallas.
I think it's cool. Very cool, because Bo Dallas needs a spot, and Neville just needs somebody to work with, really. And I think, you know, neither one of these guys are really going to come out on top if this becomes a relatively long feud, which I would like because it's shades of NXT. But I want, as much as I love Neville, I want Bo Dallas to get a win and, you know, establish himself a little bit more.
Yeah, I can see Bo Dallas winning, but I can also see Neville winning in a steamroll one-time event. But I would love to see this as a feud based on what you said, the NXT hamperings, especially if they want to link the two brands, especially with Kevin Owens coming over. What a better way than showing, oh yeah, these guys are 2 former NXT champions who have a history. Let's put them together and show you what they can do on the main roster. I think that's a great rivalry, but I definitely see Neville going over on this one.
Yeah, I think this is a start of a new direction in terms of the main roster narrative actually embracing the existence of NXT. Up until now, you didn't see much mention of what happened on NXT in regards to the main roster superstars that were down there.
Right, besides saying that they're, you know, ex-NXT champion or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and now you have Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, you have that feud being used in the build to the Kevin Owens and John Cena thing. You have the acknowledgement of Neville and Bo's feud down in NXT.
Yeah.
And it's just all of a sudden this paradigm shift. And now it's almost like NXT really exists. And for the sake of the main roster, I do think that is something that they can draw more angles, more narrative from, which is much needed.
Well, the whole idea is that this pay-per-view is only available on the network. So what a better way to plug the network and plug NXT than have an NXT rivalry spill over to the main roster and actually make sense. That's a great way to imply, hey, you know what? If you like this rivalry, check out NXT because these are the next guys who are going to be in that same group.
I think that if Bo Dallas wins this, he wins it by some crazy, cheap means that the referee doesn't see.
Yeah, and that's how Bo Dallas has been. He's done the whole believe and, you know what, believe in yourself, you'll be on top. But he hasn't done that cleanly. He's got that greasy heel factor that Seth Rollins has.
I love it.
Oh, I love it too. I just can't wait to see what happens with it. So moving on from that, we have, I'll go into the first Elimination Chamber match, which I assume will be earlier. It'll be Sheamus against Ryback, against R-Truth, against King Barrett, against Dolph Ziggler, against what is supposed to be Rusev, but at this point it's either going to be Bray Wyatt or Stardust taking that heel role and taking the third heel spot in that chamber. Who do you think comes out on top of that?
Well, first of all, I'd rather see Bray Wyatt than Stardust because Stardust is seemingly a jobber at this point. He's really just kind of lost every match that he's been in the past couple weeks. So it's honestly, this is hard to say. I don't really have a prediction because I would be satisfied with pretty much anybody winning this, to be honest with you.
Here's an interesting fact that I looked up yesterday because I thought for a moment that we were going to do a podcast yesterday until I asked if we could defer until today. But out of the guys who are in the close to main event title range, Ryback and Bray Wyatt are the only two guys in WWE who are in the main roster, like mid-card to main level feud level, that have not at any point held any kind of WWE gold. Whether it's a tag title, intercontinental, US title, or heavyweight championship, Ryback or Bray Wyatt have held neither.
Yeah, and that's an interesting fact, but, you know, as far as I'm concerned, as long as whoever wins this match is put into a decent storyline, I don't care who it is.
Yeah, and I can see either Sheamus or Bray Wyatt coming out on top if Bray Wyatt's involved in the match. Because I think if you put Bray Wyatt in there and give him that belt, all of a sudden Bray Wyatt's the kind of guy who can elevate this Intercontinental title group. Because Bray Wyatt, as the Eater of Worlds, can almost take on that John Cena open challenge of, I don't care who comes after me, I'm going to hold the title. Come on, give me your best shot. That's a really good thing. And then you have Sheamus, who's just got that heel momentum, and it's just like, I'm going to kick you in the face, whoever you are. So either one of those two guys I can see walking out with that title on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be nice to strap something on Bray Wyatt to give him some sort of legitimacy at this point. And, you know, Sheamus could be involved in multiple storylines, so, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see him with it either.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, and first of all, I think I would have to say it is most likely going to be Bray Wyatt to replace Rusev in the match because realistically, their position on the card and just their characters, they have almost that same kind of monster heel build. You can basically plug Bray right into Rusev's role and not have to change a thing about the way the match is booked. He can still steamroll through people if he has to. Whereas Stardust, I mean, you're not going to have Stardust just dominate half the match like you might see Rusev do. So I do think it is Bray Wyatt more likely to enter that match. Personally, as for my pick as to who's going to win, I'd have to go with Sheamus, just because I feel like he's the most likely to have a storyline.
Yeah.
Who doesn't really have one right now, and so he almost needs that title more than anyone else in the chamber. I mean, you've got Bray Wyatt, who's also a very good pick, but I really don't see much in the way his character might be motivated by titles like most other wrestlers would. And I feel like it might be a little bit more difficult to work Bray Wyatt with a title into the writing.
Because at least with Sheamus, there's like a sense of a storyline that could be there. With Bray Wyatt, he's just kind of like floating around, so it's harder to see him as a champion.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the only reason why I say Bray Wyatt is just because I think if you put him in there, and if you're going to have the writing staff be as fluid as they are, I think that's a great like swerve that no one would expect. But I mean, yeah, I definitely see Sheamus as the guy who's probably walking out with that title, because it makes the most sense going into Monday Night Raw to have Sheamus holding that title.
And in terms of Bray, I almost feel like in the event of his eventual main title push, if that ever comes to be, I almost feel like it would be better served just more of him coming out of nowhere and just striking unexpectedly. I mean, I don't know if you necessarily want to have that slow, gradual build for Bray where he comes closer and closer to the title. It should really be something where he just comes out of nowhere and hits hard, and all of a sudden he's in the midst of a feud for the title.
Well, Monday, before any of this came up about Rusev's injury on Tuesday when they taped Raw, and Thursday when we saw it, I almost saw Bray Wyatt as being the guy who edged R-Truth in the way that Edge did to Kofi Kingston a couple of years ago in the Chamber, to where he beats him down before he even gets in the Chamber and steals the pod before the match starts. So I already had Bray Wyatt being in this match to begin with, so just seeing Rusev out makes that a little clearer and gives him a better shot at it. But that's just me. So moving forward, we'll take a look at Nikki Bella, who is the champion, going against Paige and Naomi in a triple threat for the Divas title.
For me, I kind of like, to be honest with you, I want to see Naomi like get a little bit more of a push, a little bit more involved. She lost to Paige on, I think it was on SmackDown. And really, like I said before, there's only the 3 divas at the top of the division. So, I mean, you have 2 heels and 1 babyface, essentially. Well, 3 heels, because you got Tamina as well. But it's like, where do you go with this storyline? Because it's a 3-way storyline. Nikki Bella's almost out of the picture at the point in time because it's Paige and Naomi. Maybe they'll face each other eventually for like a championship spot. But I feel like Nikki Bella takes this, one way or another.
I have Naomi going over in this match. I have her walking out with the title because I saw a backstage rumor that Nikki Bella is working on new entrance music. And I know in the last couple of weeks we've seen Nikki Bella almost take over the face role because Naomi's taken over that kind of monster heel role, especially with Tamina, and the fact that she's just coming out to steamroll people. So I think if we're about to see like a new face of Nikki Bella, I think she almost has to drop this title. And I think Naomi's the perfect person because we can give it to Paige and we already know what we're going to get from her based on her 2 title runs in the last year alone. So you got to give it to Naomi to prove that she belongs on the top level of this Divas division.
Yeah, if that's true, if Nikki does want to make a babyface turn, yeah, I can definitely see Naomi taking it. And this way you have a 4-way feud with Tamina and Naomi. I guess Bree's kind of just there.
Well, she's out for counseling based on Daniel Bryan. That's her official tally for the main roster, is that she's out for counseling.
Oh.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same. I mean, I think I'd have to go with Naomi. Originally, I really didn't think she had much of a shot, but the more I think about it, I mean, Paige and Nikki, they're already pretty established. They can take the loss, but the recent teaming of Naomi and Tamina, I think they want to establish that, give it a little bit more legitimacy, and finally put Naomi over the top so that they have more than just those couple divas at the top. They could have a little more to do in terms of the Divas division, so I am thinking Naomi goes over at this point.
All right, moving on from that, we have probably the most confusing match of the night. We have our U.S. champion not putting the title on the line, John Cena, against Kevin Owens, your NXT champion, who is not putting his title on the line in what is essentially a singles grudge match. Now, let's let's backtrack for a second and just point out that if John Cena loses, you're immediately saying NXT is better than your top superstar on the main roster. However, if John Cena beats Kevin Owens, especially if he beats him clean, you're necessarily saying your NXT roster is not quite ready, especially if you're going to say Kevin Owens is immediately going to be a main event superstar. So who goes over in this match?
I say neither of them go over, because I think what's going to happen is either Owens is going to win by DQ, or Cena's going to win somehow, and Owens is just going to go ape shit on him, just go off, powerbomb the shit out of him, and that's going to be that.
Yeah, I don't really see how this match can possibly end clean the way Owens has been pushed,
Built, yeah.
and in just Cena's character, and I don't really see the match going over with Owens getting his shit in, putting in a good performance, and then you have Cena kick out, hit his finisher. I don't really think it'll go the same way they've been having the open challenges go. I mean, that would just be too derivative at this point, the way they've had that match on TV with Cena versus whoever for the past few weeks. So I really do think it'll just be Cena beating the hell out, or Owens beating the hell out of Cena, the way he has with Sami Zayn. Maybe another little twist on it just to differentiate it a bit from the Zayn feud, but I really don't think there's any chance of this ending in a clean finish with one guy going over straight up.
Yeah, I think one way or another you have to put Owens over a little bit instead of... I mean, you can't just have him lose to Cena at this point after that build-up.
Do you want to be a fun swerve? Cena wins based on interference from either Samoa Joe or Finn Balor.
That would be intriguing. It is a good way to get NXT involved on the main roster a little bit more. I could see that too.
Now I know Seth and I have battled between this and the main event on the idea of booking that makes too much sense, but please tell me if that would not make a compelling end to a match that is not clean. Samoa Joe or Finn Balor helping John Cena beat Kevin Owens.
See, I'd rather see, more likely it would be Finn Balor just because he's more established. And I think Samoa Joe is going to be with NXT for a little bit, just because I feel like that's just the nature of where he's going. If anything, it is going to be Finn Balor that comes up and does something like that, but I think that would definitely be interesting, a good way to do that.
I think at this point, either one of them is going to be a great swerve because nobody's really thinking that. But as we've all just discussed, this match cannot end cleanly. And what a better way to dirty that match than put either one of those two guys out there, which helps build the fact that you can watch any of those guys on NXT on Wednesdays on the network, then on a network-only pay-per-view have one of them come out and spoil the show.
Well, and it also stands to reason the fact that, Kevin Owens is in multiple different rivalries as of right now, so maybe something does happen.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be a compelling finish, but I'm just not sure that either of those names has enough currency on the main roster to get the crowd invested in such a finish, especially in a city like Corpus Christi, which is usually a pretty dead, pretty mark-heavy crowd.
It'll be interesting. I think that's one of the matches we have to peg as something we're going to watch to see how that one really finishes out.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that more than anything on that card.
So from that, I think it's easy to move into our next Elimination Chamber match, which is The New Day, your tag team champions, against the Lucha Dragons, Tyson Kidd with Cesaro, the Primetime Players, the Ascension, and Los Matadores. Who walks out of that Elimination Chamber match with the tag team titles?
I have The New Day because of what I saw on SmackDown, with the Authority sort of calling The New Day out to help. I think that somehow the Authority could possibly get involved, and New Day's going to keep it.
Yeah, I see the same thing. I just think the New Day at this point, they're really trying to put them over hard, establish them as a pretty dominant force in the tag division. I don't really see the title going straight back to Cesaro and Kidd, and I'm not sure that any of the other teams in the chamber have enough legitimacy to grab the title just yet.
The only team I would see taking it would be Lucha Dragons, and I don't think they're established on the main roster enough to strap those belts on them yet.
I think, personally, after the week that we saw with the Lucha Dragons getting the primetime spots during the, I guess, their kerfuffle during the last two TV airings, I see the Lucha Dragons coming out on top, and then I want to see the New Day kind of turn heel against the Authority, like kind of in a, I thought you were on our side, how could you let this happen? You know, we're the power of positivity. Why are you guys being so negative on us? I think that could be a pretty nice feud moving forwards for the next couple of weeks. But I definitely want to see at least one title move this pay-per-view, in addition to Naomi. But I really think the Lucha Dragons have the possibility to walk out with it.
I'd rather see it come down to the Lucha Dragons and the New Day and have something, you know, have the Authority help the New Day and have Lucha Dragons really begin to be that babyface tag team that people are really behind just because of the opposition to the Authority.
If nobody else has any other qualms about that, I guess we'll move into our main event picture, which is the long-awaited Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose title shot. Dean Ambrose was arrested, brought back in a paddy wagon, which he drove with 2 nightsticks. I don't know how he got 2, but he ran to the ring in order to sign his contract with his buddy Roman Reigns, who is on his side. Now, it's obvious Seth Rollins is going to come to the ring with J&J security. He's going to have Kane on his side. Dean Ambrose is going to have Roman Reigns on his side, obviously, because Roman Reigns doesn't have a job during the pay-per-view. So he's obviously got to come out to help his buddy Dean Ambrose. How does this match end? How do we have our World Heavyweight Championship on a network-only pay-per-view? And how do we have this play out?
I like Dean Ambrose and I want Dean Ambrose to win this, but I personally, the way I think it's gonna go is I think Rollins is gonna win this match, and Ambrose is gonna end up winning Money in the Bank down the line, and have that back and forth chase for a little while until Ambrose eventually gets the title. Because I don't think they can take the belt off of Seth Rollins so soon. I think it's relatively soon still, especially with how good Seth Rollins is.
Same. I generally see this match being used as a build-up to the eventual Money in the Bank reign for Ambrose. I mean, I think you see sort of a straightforward Authority screw job, which leads to the heightening back to near its original levels of the Rollins and Ambrose feud. So you have that hot feud going as long as they drag out the briefcase situation for, which I think, that's clearly going to be a very long-term feud, and that's a great way to kick it back off, so I think that's the direction they're going to go with it.
Here I have the Tim LeMay Homer of the Week, which I talked with this on Seth, and you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say this is what's going to happen. We're going to get all those guys on the side of the ring. Roman Reigns is going to lay out Kane. He's going to lay out J&J. He's going to lay out Triple H. Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins are going to be battling in the ring. Dean Ambrose is going to call for the Elimination Chamber to be lowered, so that way no one else can get in the ring, and it's going to be just like Hell in a Cell with him going after Seth Rollins. Dean Ambrose beats Seth Rollins, takes the title from him, which sets forth Roman Reigns winning the Money in the Bank title, which then gives Roman Reigns a chance to make a match whenever he wants, which then becomes a match with Seth Rollins, who wants his rematch on Dean Ambrose, and Brock Lesnar also invokes his rematch clause, and we have a SummerSlam pay-per-view of the ages, a fatal four-way, Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, and Brock Lesnar. Talk about a show that you would not want to forget at the Barclays Center this coming summer.
It'll be great, but I don't know. It's hard to say that they would do it so early as SummerSlam instead of wait down the line for a WrestleMania.
But you can't do it at WrestleMania 2 years in a row. I mean, great. That was a great way to play out Seth's run with the briefcase. But if you do that every single year, I mean, that's just going to become a monotony that's way too predictable. Have Roman Reigns win the briefcase and immediately want to cash it in because he immediately wants his chance at the title he thinks he was robbed of.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't know. I like the idea, definitely. And if that happens, I will not be pissed off about it. That's for sure.
Well, that's why I labeled it my homer. I'm like, it's obvious that I think Seth Rollins is going to come out with the title, but I feel like if I don't say it on this podcast, and if some kind of miracle happens on Sunday, I want to be the guy standing up there with like my thumb on my nose going, la, 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 I had a random idea that worked. And that's my idea. I really hope that happens. That's like a dream scenario, but I mean, it's unlikely. It's probably just going to be Seth Rollins walking out with the title.
Yeah, regardless of how it happens, I mean, the idea of Ambrose calling for the chamber to come down,
It's an
regardless
Ambrose
of whether
idea.
he lives or die, I mean, I could see that happening quite easily, and I would love every minute of it.
Yeah, it's definitely an Ambrose idea to lower the chamber. I think also, like, we've talked about it before, and it's like WWE is going to do the exact wrong thing, so it's hard to really predict any of these cards because they're going to do exactly what we don't think they're going to do because it's the worst decision possible, most likely.
The only reason why I come up with the idea of like lowering the chamber is the fact that Dean Ambrose is such a resourceful character. Like, even coming down to that TV that blew up in his face at Hell in a Cell, that whole idea, like, who would have grabbed the TV but Dean Ambrose just grabbing something that he found? Like, I could just see him being like, oh yeah, the Elimination Chamber is suspended above us. Lower it. Come on, let's go. I want this guy one-on-one. And that's an easy way to write off, you know, Roman Reigns, to write off Kane, to write off J&J Security and help him get a one-on-one match. And it helps get everybody back in the picture moving forwards for Payback and SummerSlam, which are like the next two big guys, because Money in the Bank, outside of grabbing the contract briefcase, there's not really much else going on for that pay-per-view.
Yeah, and I think incidentally the chamber also gives Seth Rollins somewhere to pedigree Dean Ambrose so that he can believably put Ambrose down one-on-one and not make him look weak.
Yeah.
Which, then again, is the huge problem, because we've already seen Seth Rollins put Dean Ambrose down a couple times with a pedigree. Dean Ambrose has got to get a leg up at some point. He can't do what he did in the last year, which is take pretty much 11 straight losses on pay-per-view. You got to give him another one, and you can't let Seth Rollins pedigree him to another win. It's either going to be a terribly dirty finish like we're used to seeing with Seth Rollins, or we're going to see some kind of miracle with Dean Ambrose coming out on top.
All right, so ultimately I think we're in for a relatively interesting Elimination Chamber. It's exclusively on the WWE Network. You can't get it on pay-per-view. So we'll see you next week. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. We've been doing a lot of results, or at least I have. I've been posting results from shows. So, you'll always be up to date. And like I said, we try and do it every week or so. So after Elimination Chamber, we'll have our analysis and results. So we'll see you then.
Same.